What are some real yet unexplained mysteries? Story 1. Who the bloody hell were the Sea Peoples? All we know about them is that they used to terrorize Egyptian warships, appearing seemingly out of nowhere, giving them absolute hell, and then vanishing. Hieroglyphs depicting their raids describe them only as coming from northern countries, but they've never been named in any record we've currently found. We have no idea where they came from, what their purpose was in attacking Egyptian vessels, anything about their culture, or even if they were all from one group or a confederation of several. Story 2. There is a small town in Brazil where an incredibly high percentage of children are born with a twin. 1 out of every 5 births are of twins. Rumor has it that Josef Mengele, the German doctor of Auschwitz, lived there during the 60s, and he started the whole twin spree. Although not confirmed that it happened due to his work, Mengele did die in Brazil in 1979. If it interests you guys, there is also an account of an old German immigrant who lived in Brazil until 1982 at the end of his life when he needed medical care, went to a hospital in a small town, and a Polish nun that had fled to Brazil during the war recognized him as Adolf Hitler and refused to treat him, yelling around the place, "I won't have this man here. He is bloodthirsty, killed a lot of people. Get him out of here." There are indeed hospital records from that time of a man named Adolf Shopping and 1 year later Adolf Lepping. His remains were also found, and there is an interest in running a DNA test, but it hasn't been done so far. Story 3. The Maya Collapse. 1 century Yucatan is dominated by the great Mayan stone cities. The next one, the cities are abandoned, and the Mayan people are all living in subsistence villages again. It's like if, in medieval Europe, everyone just decided to leave the walled cities and castles, and just went back to living in small farming villages. It always unnerves me to wonder what made thousands of people just walk out of the cities all over Yucatan. They actually figured it out. All the clearing of the jungles for their cities changed weather patterns, so there was less rain, which the Mayans depended on for fresh water. It would collect in cenotes, which they'd use as supersized wells for their cities. When the rains dried up, they could not support their massive cities and left. Hundreds of years go by, and these abandoned cities end up getting swallowed up by the jungle. You can still kind of see where the cities used to be. A lot of large hills are actually just pyramids buried under the jungle. Story 4. Just watched a video about this yesterday. You might think Thomas Edison was the inventor of a moving picture or movies. Nope, it was a Frenchman named Louis Le Prince. Le Prince was on a train to Paris to present his moving picture when he suddenly disappeared. Le Prince has his moving picture made by the single-lens camera, patented in England and France. However, due to patent laws in the United States, his family had to wait 7 years before they could get the invention patented for him. In those 7 years, Thomas Edison had his camera and moving picture patented. Many believe Thomas Edison was responsible in some way or form, and I believe this too. Long live Louis Le Prince story. 5. Why did the Norse stop coming to North America? If they couldn't start colonies, why couldn't they have at least started a trade route? Why didn't they spread their knowledge of a huge land across the water to anyone else they traded with back east? That information could have been worth something. Why don't any of the North American tribes have any oral stories of them meeting with the Norse? You would think something that big would have at least given birth to a legend or two. The Norse were only able to send ships to Vinland as long as they had settlements on Greenland. Once the Little Ice Age began, the Greenland settlements became unable to support farms, and the settlers packed up and left. After that point, traveling to North America was impossible. They weren't able to establish a colony or trade route with Vinland before it was too late, so it was forgotten. The Norse also spread their knowledge of Vinland. There are German and English manuscripts from the Middle Ages describing Vinland, although they have few details. The main reason no one cared was that it was correctly assumed no one could reach Vinland without better ships, and there didn't seem to be anything of value in the land. Story 6 had a tank in WoW circa Cataclysm that just disappeared. We ended the raid that week within kill range of a boss he was having a lot of fun with and was super excited to go down. His last words to us were, "See everyone Tuesday so we can kill this. Gonna head to the girlfriend's." He never logged in again. Not just to WoW either. Facebook, answering texts, anything. I honestly got worried because he lives in rural Canada, and it was a snowstorm that night. He wasn't the kind to flake, much less not letting us know he was okay, but just stopping the game. Like I said, I'd known him for years, and we were actually pretty close. To this day, I'm convinced he disappeared into a snowstorm. Story 7. The Death of Debbie Wolfe. She was a nurse who disappeared on Christmas Day after work, never contacted her mother, whom she was incredibly close to, afterward, and was later found dead in shallow water. The police kept insisting that she drowned even though there were dozens of inconsistencies. A mysterious guy left a voicemail and no one recognized the voice, and Debbie was found in clothes which would never have fit her. Freaks me out. She was found in a barrel at the bottom of a pond on her property, and after her body was removed from the barrel, it just disappeared. Even that wasn't enough to convince police that foul play had been involved. There's so much mishandling of this case by police that it makes me wonder if they had anything to do with it, or if they knew who did it and were trying to protect them. This keeps me up at night. Story 8. The Vampire Child, Mercy Brown. At the time, nobody knew of TB, and her older sister got it, and then died after that. So did her mother. Then Mercy got it. The townspeople thought there was a vampire in the family coming back and killing their family members. It wasn't the mom or older sister, but when they checked on Mercy, her hair and fingernails had grown. Also, there was liquid blood in her heart. They burned Mercy's heart into ashes and fed it to her brother, who recently caught the sickness. He still died, but the dad never became sick. I studied this story, and it freaks me out. I cannot come up with an answer. Story 9. Gravity. We know how it works. We can calculate that down to extreme accuracy. But why does it work? It makes a field, but why? There's no gravity particle. There's nothing that connects gravity to quantum physics. Yet people have known about it, measured it, and calculated it for hundreds of years to amazing accuracy. Story 10. Two men, unrelated, who didn't know each other, disappeared from Naples, Florida, 3 months apart, under the exact same circumstances. Both men were last spotted being arrested by Deputy Steve Calkins for driving without a license. Neither man was taken to jail. They just disappeared. His story is that he dropped both men off at Circle K convenience stores and drove away. There isn't as much evidence to go on with Santos's disappearance, but his story was actively disputed by the available evidence when it comes to Terrence's disappearance. For instance, he had Terrence's car towed and told the tow operator that the car was abandoned, but there were witnesses who saw him pull over Terrence and arrest him. What did he do with these men? My own theory is that he gave them a starlight ride. In other words, he drove them into the wilderness and dropped them off for them to walk home, and they died of exposure, dehydration. To me, it makes the most sense with the evidence. But maybe he's a serial killer. Who knows? Story 11. If there is any meaning to human life, if there is a conscience, why are we conscious or self-aware? It's literally the elephant on the planet that people occasionally delve into, but can easily go through their entire day without really worrying about the answer. I think some people just give up on this question and would rather attend to their immediate life concerns, like family, sustenance, entertainment, etc. Others get frustrated with the questions and just deem it a non-issue, resigning themselves to a negative answer. Most join or blind themselves to organized religions and traditions to outsource a thought process that they don't want to deal with. For such a blatant, in-your-face mystery, we are strangely dismissive of it in our daily lives. Story 12. Stardust Ranch in Arizona is a good one. 21 years ago, a man bought property in the Arizona desert. From the start, He has strange experiences that do not stop for the 21 years he has lived there, from coming in contact with black floaty triangles, portals, missing time, men in black showing up, from attacking aliens in his bedroom with a sword and saving samples in his freezer, to sitting in his living room while Roman soldiers walk through the walls of his house while the owner and his wife watch television, horses being mutilated, dogs attacking aliens, and dying from coming in contact with alien blood. It goes on, as you can imagine when living there as long as he did. He said what held him steady was his psychology background, guns, and God. Story 13. Henry Darger and his The Story of the Vivian Girls, in what is known as the realms of the unreal, of the Glandico-Angelinian war storm caused by the child slave rebellion. I have been obsessed with this man ever since I first heard about him. He lived until 1973, so a fairly recent death, and all of his works were only discovered post-mortem. And by all of his work, I mean over 35,000 pages, the entirety of Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit is about 1.4 thousand pages, of densely written fantasy stories, with hundreds of illustrations to go along with it, all as bizarre as the title suggests. Story 14. To all those saying their other sock, the answer is simple. Your dryer is a metal drum, spinning at high speeds while pumping in dry air. This builds static electricity, and the spinning produces a vortex. This vortex creates a small hole in reality, too small for most items of clothing to fall through, but just about the right size for a sock. Sometimes these socks reappear close to home, and sometimes they are whisked to the other side of the universe. This also explains why other small items of clothing spontaneously appear where they do not belong, such as that pair of panties your girlfriend found in your sock drawer. Story 15. The Consciousness. A child is conceived, and at some point, once the brain becomes complex enough, it starts to develop a feeling of self. It starts to perceive itself as the center of something, and everything else is outside. We naturally distinguish the I from the rest of the world. This is a light that goes on in the head at some point. In deep sleep, under narcotics, or after injury, the light can flicker or go out. When we die, the thing that is me is gone forever. Or is it? Religion says it's not. It's an everyday mystery that gets more mysterious the more we think about it. I find this to be the most fascinating question there is. Story 16. One I'm always fascinated with is, I believe in the mid-2000s, a student at Ohio State mysteriously disappeared, and to this day, they have no idea what happened to him. Basically, he went out to a popular bar with friends. The security camera saw him walking into the bar, and this was the only exit, as the bar is in a larger building, but it never sees him leave the bar at the end of the night. His name was Brian Shaffer. It's an interesting mystery to take a look at. Story 17. So we think the universe was created at the Big Bang, where all of the universe's matter was focused at such a small point and at such a high temperature that it led to the formation of atoms, our laws of physics, solid matter, etc. Makes sense, but what always confuses me is how that matter got to that point in the first place. Like, we know energy can't be created or destroyed, but it can't have just existed forever, right? Everything must have a beginning. Yet this is sort of paradoxical because you can't make something out of nothing. Sure, maybe the Big Bang happened due to the collapse of a previous universe or something. In that case, where did the previous universe come from? Keeps me up at night, lol. Story 18. I've been trying to find out more information about this story for about 3 years now. As the story goes, in 1996 there were 2 small creatures found in a sludge pit at a GM plant in Anderson, Indiana. People were seeing something moving in this pit, which was a concrete storage pool for leftover toxic chemicals. The pit was drained, and they found 2 similar creatures. They were roughly the size of a glove. Each had an eye and some tentacles for swimming. The creatures were placed in jars, and the majority of workers at that plant got a chance to look at it. The following day they were taken for testing by some government agency, and the story changed, and everyone was told they were not creatures. A lot of people at the plant saw these creatures. The story was relayed to me by a coworker I used to work night shift with. He has been an Anderson native his entire life and isn't really the conspiracy theory type. Story 19. Also, a place that I live relatively close to is called Kingseat. The place used to be an old mental hospital, but closed down and now is haunted. The haunted theme attraction, Spookers, is there now, but Spookers only takes up part of the old hospital. I know a bloke who used to be a warden male nurse up at Kingseat when it was open. He claims to have seen many weird and messed up things that he cannot explain. Have also had friends who have broken into the older parts of the closed down hospital, only to bust out of there after 10 minutes of being inside. Apparently, they heard a woman laughing and a baby crying. I wasn't there personally with them, so their story could be complete crap, but I don't believe it somewhat. I have heard many stories of the Kingseat Hospital being haunted. However, if any of you decide to visit New Zealand, I highly recommend Spookers. It's really fun and genuinely scary. Story 20, Aliens. Last fall, during a very serious snippet of my fraternity's pledges, where the pledges really open up about their lives, share serious stories, one pledge stood up and told us that his grandfather had worked in the army at Area 51. He said that to this day, his grandfather tells him that an alien craft was found there. He said they recovered 3 different types of alien species, and that his grandfather had seen them all, along with spaceship debris. After standing up and telling all of us this with a blank look on his face, he sat down somberly. I had serious chills. I'm getting them again just thinking about it. Story 21. NASA coverups. There have to be some. There is no way with how much investigation they are doing into space that they did not find something yet. It makes sense to cover some stuff up because humans in general are idiots and would riot over dumb stuff. Example that happens even here on Reddit. I have seen the Reddit white knights pick up the pitchforks and make people lose their jobs on some bullcrap. It takes one person to start a riot and then others join in. Just so many questions. What about the nozzle that is clearly spraying liquid on Mars? What about the objects that look exactly like trees from the top? What about the small humanoid statue? Somehow rocks formed a humanoid statue. What about the small figures in the caves? What about the thing that looks like an Egyptian pharaoh, but with an alien head? Pure coincidence in the rock formation. This is just on Mars. I am sure there are cover-ups that we might never know about. It stops mass hysteria, so it makes sense to cover it up, but I would love to know the secrets. Story 22. Probably my favorite unsolved mystery is the Eilean Mor lighthouse mystery. Basically, the 3 lighthouse keepers disappeared from the island. Inside the lighthouse, they found uneaten meals on the table and missing coats, among other weird things. The creepy part is the logbook. It's supposed to be used strictly for logging work-related entries, but they started using it as a sort of journal diary. It was explained in the logbook how there was a terrible storm that lasted for many days, and that one of the keepers, an old weathered seaman, was crying in fear. The last entry said that the storm had ended and everything was calm and fine. A neighboring island reported that there was never a storm. The wiki entry seems to back up the storm theory, with evidence detailing wave damage 110 feet above normal levels. A contemporary account by the 4th relief keeper, who initially found his colleagues to be missing, explicitly states that all cutlery and crockery from the last meal had been cleaned and put away. A lot of myth and legend has been attached to the story when the solution seems to have been determined fairly soon afterward. They were swept away by exceptionally heavy and high seas, whilst trying to secure equipment on the West Key. Story 23. The Encephalitis lethargica epidemic that struck between 1915 and 1926. No one knows why it happened, nor has there been a recurrence since the initial outbreak. The disease attacks the brain, leaving some victims in a statue-like condition, speechless and motionless. Between 1915 and 1926, An epidemic of encephalitis lethargica spread around the world. Nearly 5 million people were affected, a third of whom died in the acute stages. Many of those who survived never returned to their pre-existing aliveness. They would be conscious and aware, yet not fully awake. They would sit motionless and speechless all day in their chairs, totally lacking energy, impetus, initiative, motive, appetite, affect, or desire. They registered what went on about them without active attention and with profound indifference. They neither conveyed nor felt the feeling of life. They were as insubstantial as ghosts and as passive as zombies. Story 24. The Legends of Nahanni Valley. It's a valley in Nahanni National Park in the Northwest Territory of Canada, very isolated and remote, largely unexplored, also known as Valley of the Headless Men. Many of the tribes in the area avoided it for thousands of years, believing it was an evil, haunted place, inhabited by strange beings, spirits, etc. A violent tribe called the Naha was said to inhabit it, with large men and strange weapons. They liked to decapitate their victims. They mysteriously disappeared one day, never to be seen again. When the frontier men, miners, etc. started coming in, many mysteriously ended up decapitated, others just disappeared. It's long had reports of strange lights, UFOs, cryptids, and living fossils. Overall, a strange place, and interesting to read about. Story 25. Houska Castle creeps me out. Basically, this Bohemian fortress was constructed on top of an ancient Slavo-Germanic pagan ritual site, which was a very deep hole. Nothing too weird about that except for the way the castle was built. For one, it was built in a useless position and served no strategic purpose, so it was not desirable for medieval lords of Bohemia or any invaders to control. Then people realized that the castle was actually inverted. The fortifications were on the inside, arrow slits, turrets, thick fortress walls slanting into the castle, etc. It was as if they were trying to keep something inside. There's a legend that a Bohemian king lowered a prisoner into the hole that the castle was built on, and he began screaming, so they pulled him back up, and he had aged 60 years and died. Then during World War II, the Germans did actually occupy the castle for a time, but they reported some strange sounds, and when Allied forces stormed the castle, the Germans were dead or abandoned the place. For sure there's some folklore involved with the place, but the fact that the castle was built clearly to keep something inside as opposed to out, and even the Germans had issues with it, it definitely makes it seem like some ancient horror lies within that hole. Story 26. The Camden Wonder. In England, 1660, a 70-year-old man named William Harrison was walking a few miles to the next village when he disappeared. Later, they found his clothes covered in blood, including his hat, which looked like it had been slashed open. Harrison's servant, John Perry, pleads guilty to the act and is executed along with his brother and their mother. 2 years later, William Harrison returns to his village alive, having found his way back to England on a ship from Portugal. The guy claims to have been sold into slavery in Turkey, but the story makes no sense because how would Turkish slaves get to England? And even then, why would they capture a frail old man to do slave labor? To this day, nobody has any idea why the servant confessed to murder they didn't commit or what actually happened to Harrison. Story 27. Rico Harris. He was a massive 6'9" former Harlem Globetrotter basketball player who had drug issues earlier in his life, but had made a full recovery and was getting his life back on track. He was driving along California's Interstate Y5 from his home in Southern California to Seattle to live with his girlfriend. He was somewhere just north of Sacramento, exhausted, and told his girlfriend over the phone that he wanted to check out the mountains. All calls stopped since then. His car was found a couple of days later by a patrolman near a rest stop in the mountains. A massive search was launched. No signs of him. The strangest part, a driver later reported seeing a massive 6'9" individual wandering down the highway, just a mile from where the car was found. A week later, a search was relaunched, and massive size 17 footprints were found in the ground that was not there before. they were getting very close. And then, nothing. No trace, nobody, nothing. Where did Rico go the first time he disappeared? Where was he for an entire week? And where did he disappear again? The fact that someone could disappear twice is what makes this so damn mystifying to me.